Juan Andres Fontaine has degrees in economics from the Universidad Católica of Chile and from the University of Chicago. He's been a research director at the Central Bank of Chile, a professor at some of the major universities in Chile, and a visiting professor at UCLA. He has been the Minister of Economy of Chile for only 6 months. So we actually today have an opportunity to influence him as we ask him some questions and give him some guidance about what he can do to change the country. Without further ado, Minister.
Thank you, Tina, for this invitation, this opportunity to address all these people here, young talents that are going to change the world, I think, in the future. And thank you for the opportunity to be inaugurating this excellent auditorium. Well, let me first say a few words about myself. I'm not an entrepreneur. I've never started up a company. I'm a public policy guy, basically. I've been trained as an economist, and I've worked and have the fortunate, actually, to participate in 2 crucial instances in the recent history of Chile. One was 25 years ago, when we had a very big crisis, and I was able to work there in the team that actually solved the situation and helped Chile to take off and have a very successful performance in the next years. And then, again, this time I've been called to serve in the government with a clear mandate to help draw policies that would increase productivity and get Chile to become a developed country during this decade. That's the mission the President Piñera has set for us. So this is very challenging. We are different generations, of course, and some of you may think as a bit distant, this idea or this love for public policies. You are more private oriented people. In my generations, we used to think that in order to change the world, you had to make a revolution. Some people around here were basically wearing flowers in their heads and trying to make the revolution through peace and love. Others around the world were doing less peaceful things in order to change the world. And all those experiments failed, actually. But we get very moved as a generation for finding ways of, through public policy, changing the world. And I have had the fortune of doing that, in a sense, in Chile, of participating in this creation of a new way of managing Chile. It's sort of a startup for the nation, which has the orientation of actually widening the room for people to innovate. So instead of changing the world through revolution, to change the world through innovation, which is what you see here in Silicon Valley very easily. So, well, going for a bit for the presentation, well, I come from Chile, and probably not many of you are familiar with Chile. Chile is a small country, 16 or 17 million people. The size of the GDP measured in equivalent dollars is more or less the size of Singapore or Ireland, Portugal, are around these numbers, more or less as the size of the total size of the economy. But of course, our per capita income is much below those other countries, so that's why we are classified as an upper middle income. We are rich in exports of copper, fruit, wine, and things like that there. And we are famous for interesting things as Pablo Neruda, Easter Island, and so on. That's the country where I come from. And this is our recent history, in which we had this period from around 1970 to around 1985, in which many awful things happened in Chile, and the economy was basically trapped on a low growth path, right by inflation. And of course, people were frustrated, and that tend to create the wrong kind of answers. So policies, instead of actually opening up the room for innovation, creativity, and so on, were very interventionistic and tended to make things worse. We had a big crisis, I mentioned, in the mid-'80s, which has some similarities to the crisis the US has undergone in the last couple of years. And then we had that takeoff, which was engineered by a number of policies in which I worked from the central bank, basically as a macroeconomist there. And we had that very strong growth for about 12 years, growing at around 8% per year. And up to the point there when we got to the Asian crisis, Chile has a lot of connections with Asia because about 40% of our exports go to Asia. So when the Asian crisis hit Asia, it hit us also quite strongly. And we had that slowdown in growth and in productivity that you see there. And so after those 12 years of very fast growth, it's as if we got tired and we got 12 years of what we call the siesta period, in which actually productivity tended to stagnate. And as I mentioned, the mission we have is to speed up growth through increasing productivity growth. And to achieve this stage of, or to cross the threshold of development during this decade. That would mean to increase our per capita income from $15,000 to about 23 by the end of the decade, which would put us at the level of the lowest developed countries these days, which is the level that Portugal has, for example, or the Czech Republic is close to that. So the purple column there would be our target. In order to get to that level, we have to increase the rate of growth of the economy to about 6% per year. And we are starting on the right track in the sense. This year, we are going to grow close to 5.5% after having a very, very terrible earthquake at the beginning of the year. So that, of course, affects initially. The first half of the year has been very much affected by that. But we are speeding up, and estimations are that we are going to get to grow at around 6 or 6.5% next year. So we are in the right track. And we feel we have all the potentialities of actually accelerating growth because, as I mentioned, 40% of our exports go to Asia. Asia, of course, is a very fast-growing region these days. We have we produce many of those commodities for which the Asian countries the Asian countries lack, and we are, for obvious reasons, very connected with Latin American countries, with Brazil, for example, which is another fast-growing country these days. The Brazilian tide is going to lift all Latin American boats, and we are going to benefit for that. Chilean companies have become very globally oriented. Among our main exporters, we have top of the world exporters in copper, in salmon, in wine, in wood pulp. And we have some other companies that have become sort of leaders in this so-called Latins that are investing in many Latin American countries, in retail, in airline, and other sectors. We have this new company starting. But we think we need to accelerate this process. That's a 6% growth that would take us by the end of the decade to become a developed country. And to accelerate that growth, what we need is to foster innovation and entrepreneurship. And that's what we're setting a number of policies that go in that direction that would basically try to get Chile to be the innovation hub of South America by interconnecting us with the innovation centers of the world, and of course the most important of all, Silicon Valley. That's why we have there underlined that connection. We are doing a number of things to actually get to this result. One of them, I can answer in the specific questions other subjects, but what we are doing is this startup program that's going to connect Chile with California, and which is in the line of actually exploiting this long history of interconnection between Chile and California, which, as you know, are very similar in terms of landscape. As you see, we have more or less the same kind of deserts, the same kind of vineyards, the same kind of coastline. They're amazingly similar. So our aim is to replicate this similarity in terms of landscape, now in terms of economics and innovation. And who knows, perhaps 30 or 50 years from now, Chile is going to be as California is today, with the help of innovators. And we are going to try to bring those innovations to Chile. In order to do that, we have this Startup Chile program, in which we are attracting young, talented entrepreneurs, probably after finishing or graduating here or in other universities of the world, to go to Chile to do the early stages of their innovation in Chile. And we are facilitating the process, granting some money and for a 6-month period and other facilities in order for them to settle there. Why to do that? Because we think that in order to get this innovation culture going in Chile, we need to create a critical mass of people doing this, and to have these strong connections with the innovation centers of the world. So you are all invited to apply to this program when you finish your studies, and thank you for your patience.
Great. That was a fabulous setup, and I've got a whole bunch of specific questions. I actually am lucky enough that I got to spend 6 weeks in Chile at the end of the year. So I got to get to know the country pretty well. I got to travel pretty broadly and was completely, totally enchanted by the country. And I'm wondering, for you as a new government official, what levers do you have to make changes in the country? I mean, obviously, there's some things that you can control, and there's some things you can't. What are the types of things you're trying to do, and what levers do you have to control them?
Well, as you know, Tina, in the innovation or entrepreneurship ecosystem, you have many parts of it. What we can control relatively easily is the legal and governmental policies, and we are doing that in terms of, for example, lifting regulatory and bureaucratic barriers to entrepreneurship. There are many of them. You know, politicians typically do, as part of their job, create these kind of barriers and regulations, things of that sort. And we have to be careful well, some of them are necessary, of course, but others are just useless, and we have to eliminate them. We're doing that on a very consistent way. We are also trying to review visa procedures. For example, the experience here, of course, is that immigration is a very powerful source of innovation. We welcome immigration to Chile, but in order to do that in a practical way, we have to actually review the visa procedures. There are a number of things I thought we're doing.
Terrific. Now, when you look at Silicon Valley, what things inspire you here? What things do you hope to replicate? When obviously you came here with a lot of your colleagues, you've been here many times before. What are the things that you look at as models that you go, boy, I would really like to replicate this back at home?
Well, what I see here is a very, very powerful and productive combination of academia, of high-level science and entrepreneurial spirit. And that the way to make that combination is what we want to do, really. We do have good scientists in Chile, for example. We do have good entrepreneurs, but it's not that much of a connection between the two. What we want to replicate is that, to have, Chile become an innovation hub in South America.
So what are you doing to make that happen?
Well, as I mentioned, some things are related to connecting with other successful centers as Silicon Valley. We are bringing entrepreneurs here and taking young entrepreneurs to Chile. We are attracting IT companies to locate in Chile. We are attracting centers of excellence to locate in Chile through government support. In addition to the standard government support for education, scholarships abroad. We have a large program of scholarship abroad in Chile, and the funding for R&D.
Great. Now, there are a lot of things that we know make Silicon Valley a really successful place for entrepreneurs and people who want to bring their ideas to life. One of them is that there is a real tolerance for failure. And people know that if they try something, if they take a risk and it doesn't work out, that's not the end, that they're going to have many other opportunities to try again. Tell us a little bit about that culture in Chile. Is this something that is the same or different?
Well, there we have problems, clearly. The sort of problems that are not that easy to tackle, because there's a deep cultural problem there. There is some distrust in Chile, and so people tend to think that when someone fails is because it was committing a fraud, or it was actually... It has intention to actually fail. That's a typical suspicion, and that's have to be overcome gradually, I think. In the meantime, what we're doing though is which can be done, is to change the bankruptcy law. Our bankruptcy law creates a problem in a sense because it's very easily from a standard bankruptcy procedure to become charged for fraud. And so and that of course tend to exaggerate this kind of social stigma on people that go through a failure.
Great. So it sounds like it's something you're thinking about.
Yes, very much indeed.
Great. Now, there are other things that are very important in this culture here. One is that we have a strong venture capital, risk capital investments. People are willing to put money down on ideas that are really, really new, that are really pretty risky. Does that exist in Chile?
Yes, we have a young venture capital industry that is supported by Corfo, the development agency of the government, and it is working. They have money. They have close to $300 million not yet invested because they complain that there are not enough projects or not enough entrepreneurs in Chile. Although some entrepreneurs complain the other way around. So always, so we have the elements there. I tend to think in general, although the venture capital is very important, clearly, but one have to be clear in this, I think, that actually money follows good ideas, and it's not the other way around. So the crucial thing is to have the good ideas. When you have the good idea, money is going to come in. And we do have a capital market that is capable of doing that, I think, partially. And of course, there is a world market also. We can access to Silicon Valley or to Wall Street or whatever and get financing there.
Great. So one of the other things that this area is known for is having lots and lots of role models, local role models. You can look around this room and see lots of people probably who have started companies in our midst right here. And so you can clearly see that people look like you. Boy, you look like me. You sound like me. You've been in my classes. If you did it, I can do it too. And people are also very generous in sharing their insights and their experience and their network. Are there those type of role models there? Can people look and say, wow, this person did it, I can do it too?
We certainly have them. We have not exploited the role models so much, but we are working on that. And this mission of myself here with my team, we brought here 11 entrepreneurs, which are in the initial stages of their process, which we think they have a high impact or are likely to have a high potential. And we would like to have them being to become those models.
Well,
so we're doing that.
I got a chance to meet them this morning. They were really impressive. So I think so too. But one of the big issues that comes up is that people often don't understand that there are really different types of entrepreneurship. There's necessity entrepreneurship. Those people who go out and start a business that supports their family, and it's very limited in its potential. And then there's who are sort of opportunity entrepreneurs who start things that are very scalable and have a potential to really grow quite large. Do people differentiate between that? Do you differentiate? Do you have a goal to develop one versus the other?
Well, there's nothing wrong with the first variety in the sense of, well, of course, small businesses are needed and so on, so we'll have that happening anyway, and we are lifting barriers to foster the creation of businesses, to starting up businesses in Chile. But of course, the real growth of the economy, the growth of productivity is going to come from companies that don't have a vocation to remain small. It's exactly the opposite. They have the vocation to grow and to grow not only in Chile but also abroad. So the second kind of entrepreneurs is the ones who would like the most.
Great. I know that a lot of companies, especially in small countries, try to be global from the get-go. Is that something that these companies are doing that you talked about, these new entrepreneurs? Are they starting out with the mind that their company is a global business even from the day they start?
Well, that's the idea. And that's happening in a sense, because we are a very small market and a very open economy. We have trade agreements with about 50 countries. We have very low import tariffs. So it's a fully outward-oriented economy. So it's very natural for an entrepreneur born in Chile to be thinking of exporting.
Okay, so let's look at it the other side around, though. One of the benefits of being in Silicon Valley is this huge influx of people from all over the world with different ideas, with different cultures, with all different resources they bring in. In fact, if you look around this room, it looks like the UN, right? We've got, people here from all over the world. When I go to Chile, I don't see that. So is that something that you see as a challenge to, instead of having people in Chile looking outward to the rest of the world, to have the rest of the world coming to Chile?
Well, we welcome that happening, and as we start growing fast and having investments coming and demand for high qualified professionals and things of that sort, we are going to get, I think, that inflow of people coming to Chile. We do have it at a small rate these days, but it's going to increase significantly, I think, in the future. We are attracting for investment, we are attracting IT companies to settle in Chile, and that's going to create that movement. We have to review, as I said, the visa procedures. We have always some problems there, and we're working on those. But clearly, we think that the consequence of this strategy is going to be to change the mixture of Chile people you saw on the streets in Chile to resemble more of what we see here.
Great, terrific. Now, you talk about visa issues. there are all these little things that end up having a really big impact on people's ability to show up there and then, essentially turn their ideas into companies. What are the variables that you're thinking about? Are there things that actually work better in Chile than here? Are there things that you go, wow, this is something I should really advertise, that we've got these resources that actually don't exist anywhere else?
Well, first of all, as I said, we are situated in a location that is very unique, to exploit the growth of the emerging world, and we think growth is going to come in the near future from the emerging world, both Asia and South America or Latin America. Second, we have a very open, free market environment that is good for starting businesses. And third, we have low costs, which of course helps a lot. So in comparison with Silicon Valley, let's say, that variable is crucial. We are much lower cost producer or in many services, and that helps to foster businesses there.
Great. Now, I know you're launched this really interesting new initiative, this Startup Chile, to entice folks from around the world to start their companies in Chile. I think it's really a bold move. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what this is about. I mean, what do people get? I mean, if I decide I want to come to Chile and start my company there, what are you going to give me?
What we are doing is to offer $40,000 for people that said go to Chile. That's a grant. They get that grant for doing their early stages of their project in Chile, and we help them with the other facilities, offices, and things of that sort to settle there. And the condition they have to comply is that they have to, first to have the project have to be approved by a board. So they have to apply for that approval, and they have to be there and interact with Chilean entrepreneurs, to give a few talks of what they are doing, because what we want to get from this is the interaction, the critical mass that creates interaction between Chilean people, Chilean entrepreneurs, and these entrepreneurs we are bringing from the rest of the world. And to do that, we need that kind of conversation to take place. And the other thing we want is that these entrepreneurs probably are going to, after they spend 6 months or a year in Chile, they are going to move probably here or some other place. And we want them to get connected to Chile. The best way to actually get this interconnection with these innovation centers of the world that I was mentioning is through people. In the end, this is basically a matter of getting to know the other people, and this is a way to do it. Right. That's what we want to get from that.
So it's a nice way of inviting people down there and spend some time and get to know the country. Now let's change gears a little bit. I mean, here we are in a university. And I know that I've spent a lot of time with the universities in Chile, and I'm curious, what is happening in the universities there to stimulate this type of thinking? Because certainly, we have a room full of students here who are thinking about what can I learn in the classroom and in extracurricular programs that'll prepare me to enter this entrepreneurial world. What's happening in the universities in Chile to make that happen?
Well, we do have good universities in terms of the training, the quality of the professors are good, the curriculum, but they have been focused basically on sciences or other typical subjects, not that much on training in entrepreneurship. And with your help, Tina, and others, they are now focusing that. And that's a revolution that is happening in Chilean universities these days. That's going to change probably the curricula, but also the way the professors see their role. Because we are not used, for example, having science professors thinking in terms of patents of the research, or of engineering professors thinking in terms of startups. That's something a bit new for us, but it's changing these days.
Great. So what sort of things do you want your students to learn? What would you hope they would come out of school knowing or prepared to do?
Well, that depends a bit on the subject, of course.
But related to innovation and entrepreneurship.
Well, basically to have this frame of mind that actually gets them to think in terms of problems that have to be solved, and there is a value of actually finding out the way to solve the problem, and to be willing to take the risks, to write the benefits of that and bear the costs of eventual failure. That kind of entrepreneurial frame of mind is what we want to teach, basically.
Great. I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. Okay, looks like we've got the first one over here.
Hello. Well, first of all, I want to give a small background on myself. I'm actually Chilean. I've grown up all my life in Chile, and I came to study here as an undergrad. So I've actually gotten to experience a lot of the youth. I know a lot of the youth mentality in both places, in the Silicon Valley, my friends here at Stanford, and in Chile. I was actually, during this summer, winter in Chile. I worked at Universidad Católica and got to interact with the engineering students there and engineering professors. And one thing that strikes me about the two cultures, the Silicon Valley culture and the Chilean culture, well, first of all, engineering people here go into what you would call, it's more common to go into electrical engineering, bioengineering, computer science engineering, and non-traditional areas of engineering. Whereas in Chile, most engineering majors are going into industrial engineering, which would be the equivalent of management science and engineering, which is great because the country needs great managers and stuff. But the youth doesn't have this mentality of developing new technologies in Chile. Whereas I have many friends here who are already thinking of ideas, and their sophomore year of college, second year of college, are already thinking of technological ideas to make the world a better place.
Right, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a terrific observation. I'm wondering if you have a question.
No, it's related to the question. And I feel that's just because it's not a thing that the professors can teach. It's a thing that the students get from the student body. Do you think there's nothing the Chilean government can do to change that mentality in the youth?
Well, as we were discussing, the role of role models is exactly that one, to actually create that example and then motivate people to do that, to become innovators in those areas. But I share the view that we have that weakness, and we are working on that. To solve that.
My question would be, if you went to other universities around the United States, would it be different? You know, is Stanford unique in the United States, or is it something that you would find anywhere around the country? So that would be something that. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Great. Another question back there.
Russia is currently also trying to rebuild or replicate the Silicon Valley. Have you learned, or is Chile in any way working or looking at what they're doing? Kind of modify your system?
Well, it's a different kind of strategy. It's sort of a top-down strategy in which you find that as a project and settle a piece, find a land, develop the buildings and so on, and try to create the physical resemblance of Silicon Valley. We're not actually wanting to replicate Silicon Valley. Would be useful. It would be useless. That what we're doing is trying to interconnect, to improving the way people move from these two places, and through that means basically fostering entrepreneurship in Chile. It's a different sort of approach, I would say.
Great. Over here? Yes, Pedro.
So given that high technology entrepreneurship is very high risk, and the Chilean culture has to change a lot in order to embrace this technology, why is it that people are so interested in replicating Silicon Valley and not perhaps starting some other kind of economy that is more up to the resources and the culture in Chile?
Well, I wouldn't say that the Chileans are particularly risk averse. First of all, we're a mining country. Mine cycles, and they're awfully the price oscillate a lot, and so there is a lot of risk in being a miner. And we, because of the different reasons of our history, have been a very unstable country in the past. So people, businessmen in Chile are very used to live and somehow learn to prosper in a very risky environment. It's only that we have to redirect now the kind of sectors in which they would have to invest. And our natural resources, for example, take the case of agriculture or of fishing, are the kind of activities that need a lot of, or they can attract a lot of innovations in terms of genetic engineering and things of that sort. So, for example, biotech has a very natural place in Chile, I would say.
Great.
How do you think the people in Chile will feel about this influx of foreign businessmen? They say, how do you think there will be a struggle in the domestic industry in competing with new foreign farm economies?
No, I don't think that would be a problem. We're a very open economy. We are used to compete in the world in terms of our products. We tend to be, I think, quite friendly with visitors and foreign people coming to Chile. So I don't think that would be much of a problem, really.
Great.
So a lot of countries are getting behind the idea of collaborative consumption, in which third-party companies are encouraging their users to share items like books, accommodations, bicycles, cars, stuff like that. What is Chile's stance on collaborative consumption?
Nothing to my knowledge, to be honest.
Do you think there would be a dichotomy in, would it be a battle to introduce that market into Chile from the government perspective?
Could be. From the government perspective, these days is not a priority. But it could be in the future.
I think what she's getting at, can I restate this a little bit, is that there's a tremendous interest in doing things that are environmentally friendly and environmentally sustainable. And as you're building a new sort of economy, is that something that's important to you? Does that sort of...
And not only sustainability, but things like Groupon, where you're interacting as a group to proliferate an idea and a product, like couch surfing, where you get a bunch of people together and you're sharing these things, or car sharing, Airbnb is another example.
Well, to some extent, in countries that are not as developed as this one, that happens naturally. That's part of that's a way of surviving when you are poor. Is to share things. But in the case, regarding environmental concerns, of course, in the case of energy, we are looking at ways of non-conventional energy sources and things of that sort, that are going to be more environmentally friendly.
Great. Yep.
The Silicon Valley here and the Innovation Center in India, which is Bangalore, as you mentioned on the map, were pretty naturally and organically created. They came about on their own and not really with government support. In Chile, you're trying to, through government support, make this happen. Do you think this is a temporary fix, that while the government fuels it, while the government pumps in money, it will grow, and once it stops, it will fizzle out? If yes, how are you tackling that problem?
Well, actually, we're not pumping much money. This is not a top-down program of spending large amounts of the budget in terms of R&D or certain sectors, whatever. What we are is sort of a surgical intervention we are doing. We are trying to remove certain bottlenecks, barriers, things of that sort that are somehow creating the problem. And in order to unleash the natural entrepreneurial spirit we think it's there in Chile. That's basically what we're trying to do.
Great. Yes.
Since like investments always go to the highest return industry, Chile has a very rich resources like copper, and copper prices has gone to historical high. Right. So you mentioned you don't pump into money into the high-tech sector, but how come you will have this kind of natural high-tech industry without government support, given you have some kind of resource curse?
Well, we have significant non-copper activities like agriculture, like fishing, like others, the salmon industry, for example, which is, and all those, in order to survive in an environment that is very competitive in the world, in which costs, even in Chile, are rising a bit because of the currency effects of the copper boom and so on, they need to innovate and increase the productivity through this, through introducing technological advances. So we think the scenario is there for this happening.
Great.
My name is Gerardo Araya. I'm Chilean, and I'm getting a PhD in airplane engineering here. As you mentioned, we have a lot of similarities between California and Chile, one of which is not very nice, which is earthquakes. So, also as you mentioned, we were hit by the 5th largest earthquake in the world history back in February. And even though we did quite well, we still have economic loss close to $20 to $30 billion. So I was wondering, what are we doing in terms of bringing innovation from here to Chile, given that here we have amazing earthquake engineering centers like the one that I'm studying. Are we doing something formal?
Well, probably something's going on that I'm not too familiar with, but let me say that I think that our construction engineering in Chile did it very well after the quake, because after having such a strong earthquake of 8.8 degrees, one of the 5th strongest in the world, the amount of destruction is amazingly low, actually. Those numbers of the 30 or 20 or 30 billion dollars, well, it looks high as I'm measuring dollars, but the percentage of the capital stock of Chile is not that large. So actually, we did well, I think. And in terms of the rebuilding of the country, of course, as you probably know, every earthquake teaches a lot of lessons, and we are benefiting from them. And in addition to that, something that sounds strange, but actually is going on, is that the earthquakes help to increase productivity. Because when you rebuild better structures than the ones you previously had. So productivity is going to increase because of that, I think.
Great.
Thank you, Minister. Actually, I've got 3 questions.
You can have one question. There are lots of questions.
Okay. So when you are talking about attracting companies from other countries, one problem they may face is cultural strike. So is there any measure to assist them to integrate into local culture, for example, political environment, cultural environment, legal environment, this kind of things? Yeah.
Well, yes. This program we have in the IT companies that want to locate in Chile to offer global services, they do it in connection with Corfo, the development agency in Chile, and they get some help of that sort. But in addition to that, we have a large professional community in Chile that is used to work with foreign investors, because we are a country that has a lot of foreign investment. So also that naturally takes place in the sense that they find a way to get some help.
I focus on the students.
From your perspective, as you work to lower the barriers necessary for small business and startups, whatever,
Speak loud.
What advice do you have for the California government?
What advice do you have for the California government?
I don't know that much about California to give advice, actually.
In terms of the barrier of entry to governments,
The barriers of entry for
into business, right? So you're...
Well, I don't know really what are the barriers here. What we do see in Chile is that the process, because of political, the political process tend to create a lot of regulations. Some of them are useful. Some of them just create artificial barriers for entry into new businesses or to start new investments and so on. And we are trying to lift them. You know, the World Bank doing business ranking compares countries across the world. We have been declining in that ranking. We lost about 9 positions in the last year. So we have to make up for that, to solve that problem by improving there. The U.S. as a whole is of course very well ranked in that ranking.
Great. We have a question in the middle.
So thank you very much for being here. We've been listening to some measures that you will try to apply over the next years to get Startup Chile working. So I want to ask you about the specific targets. I mean, specific ratios or measures you'll be looking at over the next years just to evaluate the program and say if it's been a success or failure.
Well, regarding specifically the startup program, that's a tough question because actually, since the results are going to be seen in the long term, we are going to have a problem there of establishing a criteria or a metric for success. But the general idea is to create this innovation culture that creates innovation that is valued by the market, that has a value in the market. And one way to measure that, a simple metric, would be to look at the number of companies, Chilean-born companies, that are traded in NASDAQ, for example. That's a very simple metric. Today, 0. So it's easy. The starting position is easy. This is a target we have been mentioning and setting for the Chilean business community. Let's see how many of you are able to develop a company that is going to end up being traded at NASDAQ. And in the case of the Startup Chile program, we are going to claim that the ideas that have been developed from those guys that went to Chile in the startup programs are Chilean companies.
Great. Got a question over here?
I'm from Mexico, and I was just working. I'm from Mexico, and I was just working on a project for the Ministry of Economy in Mexico. And they were asking us in the place that in I think in Mexico, what were the bottlenecks for innovation. We were just giving them some advice. But I was wondering, what is the Ministry of Economy doing in Chile to support or to increase the link between the universities and the industries in order to create the human capital that you're going to need to bring all these startups to Chile?
Well, many things, but we have a program that is supporting, giving financial support for centers of excellency, international centers that locate in Chile, and they do that on a joint venture with a Chilean university, and they provide services basically to the business community. So that's one way we are doing it. Another one is that we have a tax credit system in which the companies get the tax credit if they do their R&D with universities or research centers in general. So that's, again, something we're doing. We're also working, trying to help the universities or to somehow to push them to look at patents and their patent system as a very important piece of the puzzle. And they are starting to do it. So that's another idea. So we're doing a lot of things of that sort.
The interesting thing about Silicon Valley as an entrepreneurship hub is that it serves not only as an economic hub, but also as a technological hub. Now, by wanting to essentially build that entrepreneurial spirit in Chile, are you really interested in essentially revitalizing the economic side, the technological side, or both? Are you trying to make Chile an economic center, or are you trying to really build technology infrastructure and that sort of thing?
Well, basically, we want Chile to be center of the application of ideas to create value. And those ideas may come from technological advances or may come just to the employment of the technological advances that are already there in a way that nobody have thought before. Both things, actually.
What does Chile have in terms of government research funds?
What
does Chile have in terms of government research funds? Here in the United States, the government spends a lot of money. We have large government labs. A lot of money goes into universities to develop technologies. Most of the graduate students here, in one way, are probably funded by the government. I'm talking graduate students in engineering, sciences. I think most people here would agree that Silicon Valley was the result of many things, but government labs and Bell Labs, for example, Livermore National Labs in Stanford and UC Berkeley, large labs, largely funded by the government. What does Chile have?
Well, we do have a sort of a national science foundation in Chile that's been granting money for research for the last 30 years. Of course, the scale is different from what you have here, but we do have that supports research on a competitive basis, and we want to expand that in Chile. In addition to that, we have a tax credit for companies doing R&D, and we want to expand also that.
Great. Question?
So I have a question about a specific type of innovation. It's called frugal innovation. I'm not sure how familiar you are with it.
Sorry, what?
Frugal innovation. So the idea is basically stripping down products to its basic necessities. And this type of innovation has really been emerging and been successful in nations like Africa, China, and India. And this is a type of innovation that doesn't really fit into California or like the United States specifically, but is more focused toward developing nations. Since our conversation really has been rotating about Chile kind of mimicking California's growth and entrepreneurial spirit, how do you think about innovations like frugal innovation and how do you guys consider those types of innovations?
Well, I'm not very familiar really with those. So, sorry, but I'm not. Don't follow very much.
Great. Yeah.
You just mentioned that you're going to invest $40,000 for each group in fund, right? Where does money come from as the food gets bigger and bigger? It might be a burden on the budget. And one more question. Invest money without consideration potential profit or loss should be avoided. How much return are you expecting for each $40,000 investment?
I'm just going to repeat the question for those folks on the podcast, is that where's the $40,000 per venture coming from? And basically, what sort of return on that investment are you expecting?
Right. Well, this is a pilot program. It's a limited amount of money that we are devoting for this. So people are going to compete for this, and we're going to see what happens. Now, if the pilot works well, we want to scale it, and we are going to look for probably private money to actually expand it. And what would the return be? As I said, it's not something very tangible in a sense. What we are trying to is to develop the innovation culture. And we think that creating this critical mass of people doing innovation in Chile is going to help in that direction. And it's a small amount of money we're going to invest in this in terms of the total fiscal budget. We are very conservative fiscal people. We are not actually engaging in large public investment programs regarding innovation and things of that sort. This is a very limited intervention in order to get the thing moving, basically.
Great. We're going to take one more question. Carolyn.
You mentioned that Chile is looking at successful companies publicly traded as the measure of success, but you also said that Chile is trying to overcome this notion that failure is a bad thing. So how do you target for success, but also try to foster tolerance for failure?
Well, I see no contradiction, because we know to get to be successful, you have to be willing to fail.
But is that a concept that is acceptable in Chile right now?
Well, we're trying to instill that culture in Chile. This is a work in progress, but we're moving in that direction.
So my question is, how are you trying to do that?
Well, through the role of the role models we talk about, through this interconnection with places like Silicon Valley, in which that culture is already there. You can see it, you can sense it. Through some legal changes as the bankruptcy law that we're going to change, that tends to create that resistance or bias against taking risk. So it's a number of things we're doing.
Great. Well, I just want to say I have been incredibly impressed with everything I've seen. The spirit of entrepreneurship in the faculty I've worked with there, the students I have met there, and also, as you showed in the pictures, the diversity of resources in Chile is totally remarkable. I mean, from the fisheries and the wineries and the agriculture and ecotourism, the mines. I mean, it's really quite amazing. And I can't wait to see what happens over the next years as you try all these experiments. I mean, you really are doing, you're being very entrepreneurial by trying these experiments. And we wish you the very best of luck.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Tina. Thank you. Tina, and this is the Startup Chile.